YouTubers, last video I had mentioned my setup here with the basil, and I figured I'd get a little bit more in depth with y'all. This is just a bubble foil insulation that you can get from Lowe's, Home Depot. Comes in many different sizes. This one I cut down. Use aluminum ducting tape to hold it on around the edges. I don't think with the beneficial bacteria that it matters if you have light proof or not. Obviously, you can see light's able to get down into the water, but it does minimize algae growth, the less light that you put into it. So, yeah, focus camera. I decided to coat it with that. We'll take a little bit better look at the foam. The styrofoam I actually cut out of a mobile cooler. My parents shipped stuff back from Pennsylvania, meats and cheeses in it, and I just cut it up. Used a hole saw to drill roughly that size hole. That was a hole that never got drilled because there was too running out of space. Germinating the seeds. I'll go into all the hydroponic water details on that. I did use a small amount of hydroponic nutrients in the little sponges. The sponges are just a open cell sponge that you can get from any dollar store, Walmart, Kroger, wherever you can find them, you can get them. Cut them down and cut a slot into them. Whenever you cut the slot into it, that just gives you a place to pop the seeds down into. Now, I usually try to keep the temperatures on them roughly 70 to 80 degrees during germination period. As soon as they're done germinating, they will get put into this system here. This system housed 10 goldfish for roughly 3 months. Once the bacteria was established inside of the tank was fully cycled, you can stop off with the fish. The fish got relocated into other systems, and this one gets fed with small amounts of ammonia and at some points a little bit of hydroponic nutrient solution to make the micros and macronutrients in balance a little bit, but most of the nitrates, phosphorus, and whatever else comes from the direct distribution of nitrogen through the nitrogenation process of the bacteria. If you take a look underneath the lid here, you'll see all I'm running is just a standard solids filter. Doesn't have no carbon or nothing. It's got a standard pickup that comes with your cheap Tetra 10-gallon fish tank. This model number is PF10. If you have to buy one, they're really not expensive. I would say in the $30 region. You can do your research, probably find them cheaper than that. But that is the only oxygenation that I have in this right here. There's no other oxygenation on the inside. I do not add hydrogen peroxide for oxygen. Just a small water flow right here is enough to create the 6 ppm of dissolved oxygen that it needs for the 10-gallon tank. If I was not running beneficial bacteria and not have the bio in this tank established, these plants would not survive on that low amount of dissolved oxygen. There would be bad pathogens that live off of low oxygen environments that would take over. Mostly root rot is what you would end up seeing from it. But because I do run in my beneficial bacteria tea, General Organics, Ancient Forest, Great White powder form, and just a very, very small amount of Botanicare AquaGuard or AquaShield. I forget which one. It was one and it switched names to the other one. Or HydroGuard. HydroGuard is what it is. So that's my tea that I make. I brew that and bubble it for 24 hours or 48 hours with a tablespoon of molasses. That gives me 4 gallons of beneficial bacteria that I use on all of my plants. Indoors, outdoors, house plants, they all get it. And I've actually found that adding a small amount to a standard fish tank will build the bacteria rather quickly. But I do worry about the mycorrhiza interfering with the fish. If there's any kind of bad bacteria, any kind of bad fungi that comes from the mycos or spores of the mycos, then it might cause some issues with the fish. So I add just small amounts, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the fish, so I'll stick with small amounts. Don't want to torture fish if I don't need to. I've looked up the negative health benefits, and it appears as though there's no negative health benefits as long as it is the correct fungi. So I'm not taking chances, but anyway, I just try to stick with that as my compost tea. This one plant is actually two plants. In this second plant, I just took the meristem, cut it right above the two leaf nodes, and that is creating a new branching leaf node there. I might end up thinning these out. I might end up chopping some more. Honestly, I've just been happy to use these in dishes for the time being. This project was set up essentially just to create clones for a much larger aquaponic system, the 300-gallon tank that will be set up here shortly. But it was a great start, and I'm pretty sure that I'm just going to continually run this with herbs in it, specifically basil. If my mint does well, then yeah, so be it, mint too. But anytime I could plug in any kind of new plants that I would like. These will fully come right out of the styrofoam. And you just make the hole just large enough that it will hold the foam, or the sponges, in place. And as you can see right there, look at that root system starting already. If I wanted to, I could pull this out, but I don't want to disturb the roots if I don't have to, so we'll leave that in where it's at. But on this one, I think the plants are strong enough that I can actually lift up and we can get an idea of what the actual root system looks like on this. So if you look at it, it's not what you would typically expect from a hydroponic root system. They are fairly white, but they do have some brown tinting to them. And I believe the brown tinting is due to the beneficial bacteria, as obviously you can see the water stays really clear. Let's see if I can put this back in here one-handed without destroying roots and keep the camera going at the same time. Alright, there we go. Back in place, no roots destroyed. Alright, and then I just created these little foil edges to create a seal on the edges. They are floating rafts. They do not have a stand underneath them. They are not like a cracky setup would be, where it would drop as the water level drops. So this can routinely be refilled and constantly recirculated. As long as I use the tea, I don't think any bad bacteria will come in here. And again, I can just feed with ammonia. If I decided to cut out, which will probably be an experiment here once this basil gets big enough and I get enough cuttings off of it for the new system, that I will come in here and I will stop the use of any hydroponic nutrients, do a somewhat water leach out to make sure that my ppms drop low enough, and see if only ammonia as a base feed will be enough to convert over to nitrites, potassium phosphate, and all the micronutrients needed. Something tells me there's going to be some missing minerals, missing items, which I'll have to make up with chelated separates. And at that point in time, for me, not having to buy 50-pound bags of agricultural or spend a very high amount on 1-pound bags of independent agricultural chelates, I would just go with cheap solution is General Hydroponics Maxi Grow. I actually used a little bit of Maxi Bloom in this one, and I think that's why you're seeing such the dark leaves on these things, because it does have a lot of potassium and phosphate. But I think Grow, it's like $15 for a 2.2 pound bag, and that would keep this herb chamber going for years. Honestly, I mean, it's a teaspoon per gallon at max for these plants. I think I gave, this is a 10-gallon tank, I think I gave 2 teaspoons to start out with to balance the nutrients in here, and I haven't had to apply any since. But we'll see. The ppm level is dropping slightly, but at the same time the nitrifying bacteria and the nitrates will increase. And a lot of times that I've noticed, whenever I do my scale, even on my aquaponic system, that is just pure fish, I have added iron chelate, well, not iron chelates. I'm going to get iron chelates. That's the only one that I've been supplementing, is just your standard iron supplement pills. Ferrous sulfate, it does turn the water slightly red, if you can see that. But it seems to be having an amazing difference on the growth on the plants. This pepper would have not done well months ago whenever I was not adding iron. I had a severe iron deficiency. So if that's the case, I will still add bacteria. That way I don't have to. Oh, but back to the other subject, the parts per million. Reading the parts per million on my little aquaponic system over there, I am only getting like maybe 300 to 350 parts per million in the water. Sometimes it'll read up to 400 after like a really heavy feeding. But a lot of it's telling me is the amount of actual nutrients available to the plant are not reading in salts, not reading in EC, electrical conductivity. So using a meter to read that isn't going to help. I guess it's just trial and experiment. I could do a complete phosphorus nitrate test, but we're just going to go by play on this one. I will just do a constant check on it, and whenever I do everything, I log my results on a piece of paper. Everything's been logged so far. One thing I have noticed, the importance of pH. Whenever I had this going, when I first started everything, the pH was up around the 7.2 to 7.5 mark. That is quite a bit too high for hydroponics or aquaponics. Really like to keep the level below 6.5, essentially between 5.5 and 6.5, or 5.5 and 6 is the sweet spot. Everybody says 5.8 is where you should keep it. Don't veer from there, but I know plants like swings because the availability of nutrients is increased at certain pHs. There's a chart that'll show you at 7 pH the phosphorus becomes more available, or 5.5 more nitrogen becomes. I would have to look at the chart. I know that's not actually the way it is, but basically what you're trying to do is keep your pH, which I actually bought a bottle of General Hydroponics pH Down for this experiment. But the price on it, and doing a little bit of research, I will no longer be using that because I believe it's a potassium-based pH Down. And I know a lot of plants can take battery acid, is what a lot of people are currently using. And last but not least, on the hydroponic basil, the growth rates are just absolutely staggering from any soil counterpart that I've tried with this system. Now granted, it does take a minimum of a month, probably 2 months, to establish the amount of bacteria that you would need to only be able to feed with ammonia, but at the same time, it is well worth it in the results. If you can set up a fish tank, or if you have an existing fish tank and you're not happy with doing the maintenance on the fish, if you want to get rid of the fish and keep the tank, this is a very, very low maintenance option. When the beneficial bacteria is running fine, when the solution is at the correct ppm for the plants and the plant size, this system will not need to be checked or adjusted for 2 to 3 weeks. The basil at this point in time, I have been adding back water, pH 6 water, do a little bit of acid in the water, pH down in the water right now, but it will be acid when I get the battery acid. And that's it. Just add back. Eventually, in maybe another week, I'll do a ppm test, and I'll do a reading of the plants, check all the leaves over, make sure there's no deficiencies. But the growth rate, these literally, I planted these middle of January into their little sponges. Towards the end of February, they were all popping out and starting leaves, and they got put in here. I'm trying to look. I don't know where my chart's at for this one, but I'm thinking it's February 1st. I believe it was the first day of February I switched everything over to here. So when switching everything over, it went from the little sponge and a plant maybe that size, if not smaller, to the 14th of February, as today, 2 weeks, and plants this big. and already having cuttings off of plants. 2 to 3 cuttings already in 2 weeks, and then this one is going to get snipped right there, and I will either make cuttings or I will use this basil up in a salad or a pesto. I think there's enough here to make a real nice small pesto for me and the girlfriend. But anyway, that's how I do this system in hydroponics, aquaponics, bioponics, whatever you want to call it. It's a mixture, but it is working fantastic. And it is so easy to maintain and so easy to care for. And so simple on the form of, it was a free fish tank. I got this fish tank gifted to me. And there's a lot of them you find on Craigslist. Free fish tank, come and get it. Or, you know, you find them for $5, $10. That is your complete system there. Buy a couple 14-cent goldfish, give it a couple months. If you want to, take the fish out and relocate them. You can't, I wouldn't leave the fish in this system. I'm sure you could. You could always set up another additional whatever with the fish in it. I don't think fish would want to survive in the hydroponic and the bioponics because I do feed a pretty high level of ammonia. So I don't think the fish would be very happy with that, but I know the plants are. So even if you happen to have some fish die out, whenever you add beneficial bacteria, take the fish out and just plant. That's all you have to do. Take the fish out, plant in, feed ammonia, and every once in a while give it a little bit of hydroponic nutrients to make sure that they are not deficient in any other nutrients, any micros or macros. But I think that does it for this system. That's a pretty good explanation. If you guys have any questions, throw them in the comments. I will answer all the comments, all the questions that you guys have for it. So you guys stay good out there, and I will see you next time, YouTube.